snappy, won't you? I have some very heavy thinking to do before 10 o'clock.
All right, good evening, world. Welcome into Greenie Sports Cards Live, our first show of 2025. We've navigated the Christmas, the Hanukkah, the Kwanzaa holidays, the New Year. A little disjointed with them holidays in the middle of the week this year, but we're back and as excited as ever to bring you what we described as the world's first multi-stream broadcast for the hobby industry. We're of course broadcasting live across multiple platforms. You've been consuming this content for the last year across Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Twitter and the X, LinkedIn, and all points in between. And of course, eBay Live, where we go live with our auction every Tuesday and Thursday with Alex, who is just extraordinary in that role. You want to make sure to tune back in at 9 p.m. tonight Eastern on eBay Live, and again on Thursday at 9, where Alex does Call Your Shot. Of course, his name is Alex Shot, so a little play on words there. But he'll have basketball cards, baseball, wrestling, soccer, football, all points in between. And the best part about that show, and one of the best parts about this show itself, is the interactivity, the comments, the ability for you to interact with us, regardless of which platform you're consuming. Make sure you check in, let us know where you're watching from. If you have any questions for our guests, for any of our guests, please drop those in the comments section as well, and we'll be sure to get to those. We had an amazing year, which Greenie and I will touch on again. If you missed our recap show on the 28th, that's available on YouTube and some of the other streams as well. We had well over 50 guests join us last year, from celebrities to athletes to influencers to hobbyists and coaches. It was a really amazing year, and it just continued to grow and evolve as we did this. And this year will be no exception. We're going to keep the train going and bring you hobby news and event news and interesting interviews and content from the hobby world. And tonight is no exception. We've got the chance to speak with Will Stern from Cllct Media here upcoming shortly. And we'll hear about Will's evolution and his journey in the journalism space and what he's doing with Cllct. We'll get to talk all about that, get some of his insights for 2025 and reflect on some of his favorite stories from last year. And before we do that, we'll go ahead and welcome in the man himself, of course, Steve Greenberg, aka Greenie, the namesake of this program and the business itself. Greenie, I know it's a little late and Larry David would probably be upset, but Happy New Year.
Thanks. Yeah, he would. Yes, he would. But yeah, no, we're back for another year. And this week, we kick off a busy 2025 with actually two shows this weekend. We're Kirtland on Saturday, the show Jeremy, where everybody knows your name. And then one of our new shows, we're going to do Monday, MLK Day. There's no school and a lot of people are off. So the Glen Eagles Golf Course in Twinsburg is allowing us to use their venue. And we're going to do a show during Monday, business hours, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And I know we have a lot of kids that are already coming scheduled for that show. So, I mean, what a way to just kick off the new year.
Yeah, and the end of last year was no slouch either. A lot of stuff around the holidays. Of course, there was the Cleveland State women's basketball signing at your Broadview Heights show. The entire team showed up, which was part of a promotional appearance. But of course, that was the opportunity for them to sign their NIL cards produced by Greenie, and those cards are available at Greenie CllctCards.com. Well over 28 athletes in the portfolio at this point through those NIL deals. Of course, the Cleveland State women's, Akron, Ball State, Reagan Bass was the most recent distribution today. Reagan, of course, played at Akron last year and is at Purdue. And you've got cards from Notre Dame available as well. Of course, Hannah Hidalgo, one of the first cards and exclusives from Greenie Sports Cards. So lots of good stuff on that front. The show is tremendous. Broadview Heights show, of course, Greenie. That's about a 100 table show that happens quarterly. Kirtland, as you mentioned, the show where everybody knows your name, comes in a little bit smaller, about 40 tables. It's a much more intimate show. And that's the beauty of what Greenie Sports Cards does. There are shows and accessibility for everybody. We've talked about that. You can get your foot in the door in Kirtland and not be overwhelmed. You can go to the Broadview Heights if you want more of an array of tables and distributors from around the country. The Great Lakes Collectors Convention, of course, in April, which will now be the largest show in the region, presented by Greenie Sports Cards, now that the National is moving over to Chicago for the next couple of years. And you just announced a whole new show that's coming up here as well in May in West Virginia, the Mountain State Collectors Convention.
Yeah, I mean that took some work. We went down there, toured the facility, and spoke to the convention bureau and visitors bureau, and came up with a plan. And they love it, we love it. It's an area that hasn't had anything this large in quite some time. And if you look at the map, within a 4-hour radius of Charleston, West Virginia, I mean there's 7-8 cities that can easily get to the show.
Yeah, that's going to be an exciting show in the convention center there, and of course we'll bring more details and information as we go. We apologize. We are aware of Greenie's mic at this point, so we're going to see if we can get that tweaked out. But in the meantime, again, lots of signings, lots of NIL cards, lots of shows to take in, and of course the auctions that take place every Tuesday and Thursday. And on the other side, pitchers and catchers will report on February 11th, at least in Cleveland. They won't report to Cleveland, but they will report to Arizona, and that's not that far away. So those of you disappointed with the Browns these days in town have something to look forward to, along with the Cleveland Cavaliers that, despite their loss the other night, continue to roll. So amazing sports town, amazing town for sports talk. We're proud to be here broadcasting Greenie out of Twinsburg, and of course the rest of the game out of Cleveland. And we'll continue this ride with you every Tuesday. And as I mentioned, tonight is no exception to be able to welcome in Will Stern. He's an accomplished editor and reporter. Currently can be seen and engaged on Cllct Media. And prior to joining that, he was with Rally for a couple of years, serving as a content manager and content lead and writer. Will attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's got a degree in journalism, strategic communications, and entrepreneurship. And he gets to walk hand in hand with Darren Ravel as a part of Cllct in that launch. And we had the good fortune to talk to Darren last year before the National, and really looking forward to bringing in Will here as well and catching up on their evolution over the last year. So, Will, welcome to Greenie Sports Cards Live.
What's up, Jeremy? Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. We're gonna try and ride this out while Greenie gets his mic situation sorted. Sure. And we pride ourselves on trying to produce this thing with some professionalism, and so we apologize for that side of it, but we'll get it figured out. And really appreciate you joining us tonight.
I'm super pumped to be here. Love it.
So let's talk about your journey first, because Cllct obviously is where you are, where you landed. There's some amazing news coming out of there. I mentioned you attended the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Where did you get this bug, and how did you start in both journalism, and then where did you figure out that from a passion standpoint, the collectible space was the way to go?
Yeah. I mean, the journalism is kind of easy in that I just always liked writing. And then it's like, I'm in high school and it's like, okay, what do you do if you like writing? It's like, all right, the only way that you can have a job is a reporter, I guess. So steered in that direction. And yeah, just that was really just always what I wanted to do. I love I love like even just old like magazines, and like I've always just like loved looking back at like Rolling Stones from like the 70s and Esquire and all that. Um, the collecting stuff is actually, I think I have a pretty unique journey in that I didn't collect really as a kid. Like, had baseball cards for sure. Was a huge sports fan, always big pop culture fan, loved history and everything. And looking back, like I could be like, oh, I had baseball cards. Oh, I kept those magazines, but like I did not collect. I couldn't tell you before, when I was a kid, I wouldn't have thought of, I didn't know what PSA was. I didn't know, none of that stuff. I graduated college and it was during COVID in 2020. And the job offers that I had as a reporter were all pulled on the same day. It was like right after Rudy Gobert touched all the mics. So I was like, you know what? I've been like kind of playing around, working at a couple startups in college, like kind of interested in that anyway. So I really was just looking at startups and applying to jobs there. And I ended up at Rally purely, had nothing to do with the fact that Rally was in collectibles, more so just the job I got. I found it interesting, right? And then I spent over 3 years there, and my job was basically, for those who don't know, Rally was, it's like a fractional investment platform, right? And they've got a Honus Wagner card and everything from that to dinosaurs, right? So my job was to learn every single little thing about all these assets that we would get on the platform. And in doing that, like when you spend every day in that world, it's so, I think within like a month of working there, I was like, oh, this is something that's like infected me. Like I have the bug. And then, since then, that's 2020. So which is a weird time to get into this world, right? Like that's now with the hindsight and like knowing the context, that's insane. Like for me to come into it thinking that was the way things were. And then ever since then, no, I've just been super in love and obsessed with collecting all sorts of stuff and, all the stories that go with it too.
Really is a fascinating space, this hobby world and collectibles industry. Of course, our friends and viewers of this program know that I don't collect. I don't necessarily have a passion for figuring all this stuff out, but I've been very, very blessed to be around it, having been part of the national production team for multiple cycles while in Cleveland as an employee as a director of events at the IX Center, and then being a part of Greenie's team to be around these events. We love the energy of it. We love it. I know for me personally, seeing people come together in an environment of commerce and exchange of ideas and sports and celebrity and enthusiasm, there's something really magical about that. Um, the world has evolved into the online space, particularly through COVID, as you mentioned. There's a lot more accessibility about that. Talk about the dynamic of those two worlds, how inherently this is really a touch feel type of hobby, and having access to these things. And now you've got the online space as well. How do those things coexist together?
Something that I've heard repeatedly when I've spoken to people that, in cards, and also like most recently, I did a story on a guy he's got like the greatest collection of sealed Star Wars figures from, 70s, 80s, etc. But like it carries throughout categories. People that collecting for years and how eBay, like they all independently say the same thing. They're like, the world opened up all of a sudden. Like I didn't have to go to a hobby shop or, meet some friend of a friend and go through their collection to find something they were looking for, right? They're like, all of a sudden I could just find it, or I realized there was this whole community. So that I think I don't think that the hobby could have gotten even close to where we are if it wasn't for that connection. I think that's obvious, but it is interesting, right? Because it's an inherently like touchy feely medium. We're talking about literally owning pieces of things, like, and I think the other thing there is like the advent of like vaulting, right? Like PWCC, now Fanatics, and then PSA's vault, the connection to eBay. People are buying and selling cards and other things without ever touching them. And, I think there's, people might be like, oh, that for me, it's not, I don't get enjoyment out of that, whatever. But there's a huge segment of people that if it checks every box, and that's just adding an order of magnitude as far as activity and volume to the market, and frenzied activity around everything, I think.
Well, hey, Greenie, type your questions in the comments section like our viewers can do. Yeah, this is a new one for us, so that's never happened before. But we'll continue to get that figured out. So, Will, you're with Cllct Media. You mentioned Darren Ravel had this vision. What did he approach you with, or management, however that came to be, where you landed at Cllct? What was the pitch where they said, "This is what we're doing. We got this crazy idea. Come along with us"?
So it's funny. I can't even remember like what the first thing was, but it was just it was Darren said to me, like, he's doing this thing, and he was like, you want to do it. That was basically it. We kind of talked about similar concepts, just because like I think something that he and I both had agreed upon or just shared the same opinion was how lacking storytelling in the space was, right? Like, some of the biggest items that go to auction that, maybe I can never afford, but I'm just looking at because I'm intrigued by it. I'd notice, I'm like, why are they not telling the actual story? Like, there's more information that's just beneficial to everyone and interesting and is a reason for people to get excited about it. So that, I think, baseline is just the genesis. Like, this is a world that so many people care about and could use more coverage, was really it.
So, speaking of that coverage, we'll talk about some of the stuff to look forward to in 2025. But as far as coverage goes, what did you see in 2024 that sticks out to you? You guys did an end of year recap, and you've talked a lot about this. Now that you've had some time to reflect on it, what are the real stories coming out of the hobby industry in 2024?
I think as far as like broad takeaways on the positive side, for sure, I think a moment that sticks out to me I don't know if I would have said this even like 2 weeks ago, but just thinking about it more recently, the Pirates posting about the Paul Skeens rookie debut patch, I felt was super symbolic of just 2024 as far as mainstream adoption, right? Like, we felt like you could just see anecdotally bigger brands, companies, notable people just that aren't seen as hobby companies that are just expressing interest, right? And, for lack of a better word, normalizing it, instead of just being a niche hobby. I actually think the hobby suffers from being called the hobby because it's like, it almost just implies it's niche. But that outside interest was a super notable thing to me that felt like it wasn't there. Even when things were going crazy during COVID, you'd see a million headlines in mainstream outlets, but it was just, these people are insane. Look how much this sold for. People are going crazy. But now it just feels like there's just a lot of genuine excitement coming from all circles and areas. That to me is probably one of the more dominant trends, and I think one that's just an unambiguous good.
So where did that land or leave off? There were all kinds of offers from the team, and then the significant other put some
Yeah.
extra sauce on it. And I don't even know at this point if the card's been hit, if it's been found.
No.
Where do we leave off with that?
Yeah, I think we'll see. But I think the offer, if you count like 30 years of season tickets, a bunch of other stuff thrown in. Then Paul Skeens' girlfriend Livy Dunn being like, "I'll watch a game with you" or something. I think we looked at it and we're like, if the seats are, I forgot what we said. We said like section whatever behind the plate, like good expensive seats. It would have been like $250K plus offer. But yeah, no, I mean that's another trend, 2024. More notably, I think with the Olympics triple auto card that has yet to be pulled, despite like the most press ever for a chase card, I think, is how big chase cards got. And it's obviously a connecting story, and maybe one on the down less positive side is the fact that triple auto was like such good press for fanatics and for the hobby overall. Just people are so excited. It was a really good idea and good card. And the fact that it's still yet to be pulled is definitely not what I think they had envisioned. Kind of a bummer because it's a cool card, I think.
Yeah, they probably thought it would hit by now.
I think they definitely did. Yeah.
So, it was pretty interesting too to follow up with Paul Skeens and kind of people coming out of the woodwork. So, the Hobby Ohio, which is a great supporter of our show and friend of the show, we had content earlier this year. Chaz, the dude, was very fortunate to land a 1-of-1 Josh Young in a break. And Josh actually got a hold of him through mutual acquaintances and said, "I want that card. What can we do?" And we were fortunate to have the opportunity to follow the dude as he met up with Josh at formerly the Jake at Progressive Field earlier this year, and got to talk to Josh and was there for the moment with the exchange. And the dude really didn't want much other than what was on the table, some tickets, the chance to meet Josh and spend some time with him. But it shows you that these players are collectors too, and people too. And you forget sometimes he might be a 25, 26-year-old kid, but at his heart, he just wants his cards, and he was thrilled to get it.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that exact thing of the player finding the person that pulled their 1-of-1 or whatever and reaching out and being like, "I'll give you my bat," or "I'll give you my jersey," or whatever. That I feel like is happening every day on Twitter and Instagram or whatever. Like that is also, I mean, similar to the Pirates thing. It's just like, what could make the hobby cooler to sports fans, right? The broader circle outside of collectors, than the players being into it. Like that's got to be the most effective thing to just getting people to be like, "Oh, you know what? Like Mike Trout likes this. He's pretty good at baseball. I like baseball, so it must be cool."
Very cool. Well, Greenie, let's try it. I know you got a ton of questions for Will, so let's hear it.
Hey,
Am I working? Am I non-staticky now? Yeah, so weird. I want to touch on that triple LeBron card because I bought into that, right? Because if I was told I was going to get $1 million, I'm going to play that lottery ticket. Do you think it hasn't been pulled for a reason?
I think it's trapped in a pack that's been selling on eBay back and forth 1,000 times.
I think you're right, which is weird. So when I got my package, I did not have one of those packs, so instantly I knew I was not a winner, right? So, yeah, no. Do you think that's going to be a trend that bounties are going to continue to happen with not every product, but with a lot of products next year?
1,000%.
Yeah,
it's going to get more and more.
And it's not just the companies; it's the breakers are putting bounties on them.
And every time they do, people say their names over and over again. It's like, that's why you see the prices for a lot of them are just like, the bounty will be more than the card is worth, and everyone knows it, right? Maybe, I don't know about the Paul Skeens one or the triple auto one, but in a lot of other cases, it's like, okay, that's double what it's worth. Everyone knows. But whatever the company breaker person's putting out there, all of a sudden their name gets repeated over and over again. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a fun thing to happen though. I like it. I think everybody likes it. I think it's good for the hobby. It brings money in because it brings a lot of new money in that's probably never been in the hobby before.
Yeah. I mean, I think to play the downside, I think the argument would be like it's a lottery ticket, it's not the joy of collecting or opening a pack, because if you don't get the one that's the chase card that has the bounty on it, you're throwing it in the trash. But I think hopefully it strikes a middle ground where people are, I want to open this pack. This is fun. I'm interested in the cards, but also, if I get that one, I know that there's a bounty on it or something. And I think hopefully that's where you can get, because it's not a great thing, I think, to have it purely be based on that, like just ripping packs, looking for the bounty thing. But I think it nets out to a pretty big positive because of the interest it brings in.
So
let's talk a little bit
year,
about Cllct. Will
right.
segue into that, because a lot of content's coming out of it. We talked about Darren reaching out to you. Where are we today with Cllct versus the vision of when it started, and ultimately where do you guys want to go with it?
Yeah, so as far as where we are versus where we started, we definitely we started doing things with kind of brands and teams. We just did something with St. John's for like the Lou Carnesecca Day celebration that they had. We're kind of acting as like an advisory service almost. How do you make a collectible that honors Lou Carnesecca in that case? So that's obviously a new addition that we hadn't been really doing publicly for the first 6 months, but we've now been rolling out, and we'll continue to announce some cool things. And then on the media side, I think we've just, we started out with the goal of just covering as much as we can. And I think I don't know how many stories we've done, but a lot. And we've had some.
I know that I pay attention to a lot of the stories because it's interesting. Like there's some things like for instance, Back to the Future. I'm a huge Back to the Future guy, and I know Darren wrote about it and he went to see it. And I actually, if you can see it here, this is one of my favorite cards, and it's got both of them signed. I bought this in the Atlantic City National right after COVID.
I love that.
It's not just sports, right? There are so many collectible things which you guys cover. The comic books, like you said, the Star Wars article that you wrote, the Forrest Gump article that you wrote, that you said was your favorite article of the year, is amazing. What he could have collected, Forrest Gump. A tidbit. We actually did an event with somebody that was a body double of Forrest Gump, so it was pretty cool this year. Yeah, that's awesome. Alan Robinson is his name. He also was a Ghostface in Scream, but he was a body double of Tom Hanks in Forrest Gump. So, but things like that are really interesting. And yeah, there's your article right there of. I mean, can you imagine what he could have had? You did imagine because you wrote it.
Yeah.
Things like that are just absolutely amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, that one specifically is like just a pure. We're like, this would be so fun. Let's look at all the scenes where he's sitting next to famous people and he grabs Elvis's guitar or whatever. I don't even remember specifics, but that was just so fun to go into. And yeah, I mean, I personally, I love my collecting interests are kind of evenly split between sports and everything else as far as what I'm actually interested in. Like even the weird stuff, the historical stuff, I don't necessarily own any of it, right? I wish I had a Declaration of Independence. I don't. But I'm interested in that one's going to sell for $2 million at Sotheby's. And that's worth covering. I just think it's fascinating. So that breadth is something that I love, and I think it shows again that the collecting world's so big and there's so many different areas where it feels really siloed. Like there's so many comic book collectors and so many sports card collectors, and I feel like that Venn diagram rarely overlaps, and it obviously should, because it's like it's like those two people, those two collectors are cousins, you know.
At Greenie, we had an interesting evolution there too, where you've got these silos. But last year with the launch of the Medina County Collectors Fair, which you mentioned Ghostface Allen and who played double for Tom Hanks, and we had some other horror characters there. There is sort of a natural progression of or that layover of pop culture and comic books and cards, and maybe 3, 5, 10 years ago that would be unthinkable, but there is a space for people to be welcoming in the hobby. Will, are you seeing that on a national level, or is there still sort of this separation of church and state, or are people who collect, they collect?
I think in a broad sense, people who collect should just collect. Like I think you're a sports card collector, but if I interrogate you enough, like you'll be like, oh, you know what, I have an interest in this other thing, or I have a couple of those lying around. Like it's the same gene, it's just directed at different things, and everyone has different interests. But no, I mean there's definitely crossover and I mean, even look, you stick a game worn jersey in a car, and all of a sudden that's memorabilia and trading cards. You put a Star Wars character on a card, that's pop culture trading cards. Movie props are like one of the biggest exploding markets, and that's obviously its own thing. But you got to imagine someone who wants to pay, whatever it was, like 30 something million for the ruby red slippers, whatever.
Judy Garland.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know who bought it, but I would assume a very wealthy individual or entity would also express similar interest in a Babe Ruth jersey. It's so. I think there's certainly crossover, but you still see like blowout forums. You look at, and that's like the diehards, and they're getting so deep in everything. There's the same thing for like CGC comic forums, like that. And those people are not interacting. That is like they are drilled in so deep, and that's fine. I think those people are like the base of the foundation of each of those kind of.
I definitely think the investors are in all these different things. I know that, like I know Patrick Ryan, he does cards and he does art, right? And that's maybe not your average collector getting into, and I'm not even talking with the high dollar stuff, but the average collector is probably not buying comic books and records and toys and cards, but your high-end investors are. They're getting into everything that they think will appreciate years from now, whether it's the music memorabilia, the handwritten lyrics of Bruce Springsteen, or Judy Garland slippers, right? Or the Babe Ruth jersey. I think that's where the crossover is really prevalent, is these high-end investors.
Totally. And I mean, because it's like, if it's like a hedge funder or individual investing with a long time horizon, and it's about dollars and cents because they, it's alternative asset class, et cetera, they're totally agnostic to the actual item. It's like they're looking at past sales and probably doing something more complicated than I do when I look at comps for a Jalen Brunson card or whatever. But it's just they're doing an analysis, being like, this is going to be worth more, right? So of course they don't care, but that's always kind of I think there's a knock on that, right? Like, oh, it's this outside money is kind of, it's not for the joy of it, and I see that, but I also don't think anyone's dropping 24 million on a Ruth jersey purely for the joy of it.
That's right.
I think that's probably always been the realm of the elite.
You mentioned the Babe Ruth jersey that sold for auction and the ruby slippers, both of which were present in Cleveland at the National Sports Collectors Convention this past year. Those are two things that, while amazing to see, are really unattainable behind the glass for just about everybody. But beyond that, what else of interest did you see, or that piqued your interest from a memorabilia standpoint? Something off the wall or unique that maybe was at the National, because it's a breadth of everything, or throughout your journey last year. What's something that sticks out?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I'm trying to think of stuff specifically that I saw at the National. You know, there were some really cool at the National. I remember there's I'm trying to think of I think it was a Ted Williams check made out to like a barber, and it was like date, like I was talking to the guy and he was like, yeah, this is like the day before I think it was like before he hit like a 2 home run game or something. It was the same day, and like stuff like that. It's like, that's just so cool that somebody went through these checks and was like, this one's important because it's connected to that day. And memorabilia wise, I think it's tougher because it really is all high end. Like, I don't own any memorabilia. But you know, you see some of the way that the NBA has been engaging with. They have like a partnership with Sotheby's now, and their stuff's available like for purchase, not for auction, and it's in the hundreds sometimes, not the thousands, which you know, it's more obtainable. So I'll see like a Knicks jersey and be like, damn, I want that. Like, I want that. I want that OG Anunoby Christmas Day jersey. But you know, as far as memorabilia goes, I think NBA specifically game worn jerseys were like definitely the story of the year, just as far as what dominated the market.
So let me ask you about that, because I had a question that I wanted to bring up later, but with you saying that the game worn jerseys and the amount that those are selling for, let's talk about game worn jerseys inside trading cards. And the big thing that's going on, that you see people ripping up a Jamar Chase card, and it's got, I don't know, T. Higgins, another Bengals player. But the fact is, if these jerseys are selling for ridiculous amounts of money, how do these card companies get them? And how do they justify cutting them up and putting them in a $10 jersey card?
I mean, if the $10 jersey card on the back, it probably says,
yeah, right,
it's not attributed to any game or event, right?
Right.
I mean, like with the Wembanyama Mercury set, we know that it was a debut jersey, which is really interesting, right? Like that, we know that when Wemby wore at least 2 in his first game, and we know that one of those sold for $762,000. We don't. I haven't been able to find out whether or not Fanatics was the buyer of that jersey, or they got a different one through, you know, their league deal or whatever. But either way, it's like that's an investment to make a product there. But I mean, go back to early 2000s. Don Russ bought, I was just talking about this with someone recently. Don Russ bought one of, I think at the time, 6 pinstriped Ruth jerseys and cut it up and put it into cards. Like that, I mean, that's crazy. And as far as like people saying that's like a horror story, how dare you cut it up? I'm probably not usually on that side, but when I hear that, with the fact that there's now just like there's only 4 or 5 and there used to be 5 or 6 Ruth jerseys, that one I'm like, oh, maybe you shouldn't have cut that up. Those cards are so cool. I mean, just the idea that you could own that for you know, I think a couple $1,000s for the cheapest ones, versus nobody can ever own a Ruth jersey. That's really cool to me.
We're seeing this evolution now too of famous celebrity or historical figure signatures that are being cut up. They're being taken from letters or checks or all across, and now they're showing up in cards. Here's the Benjamin Franklin example, but Topps is doing this all over the place. Is that, what's the take on that? Is that neat because we get access to it, or does it destroy the original artifact?
I think they're super cool. I mean, that was the 2006 set, which is crazy to think about like that. You know, I feel like we're talking about how there's innovation right now. It's like that was 2006, and I think that's so cool. They had one-of-one cut autos of nearly all of the Declaration signers, and I think all but one or two of the Constitution signers. But the thing there that makes it different is Benjamin Franklin signed his name so many times. So like they're not taking an important document, right? They're probably taking a check, as you said, or well, I guess I don't even know if they wrote checks back then. But a deed of sale, I suppose, something that's relatively unimportant, right? And putting it in a slab, it's like something that would otherwise be worth 10 grand right now is worth 40 grand because it's in that card, which is a really interesting facet. And I think that speaks to just the collector's mentality of like the commitment should make, whether PSA or just the brand of having something in a slab. And I know that this is what it is. It fits with my other things. And it's kind of categorized in a certain way that I guess meets standards. But I think it's awesome. I'd love to have like a cool cut auto like that. I find that super cool, and it's easier to present than a document that you're worried is gonna, I guess, get and you got to keep it out of the sun and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, at one point, my favorite card that I had a while back, I've since sold it. I had a Jim Thorpe cut autograph out of, it was an Upper Deck product, SP Legendary Cuts or something like that. And it looked like it was like a menu of somewhere, because the people the person that was underneath it had no ties to Jim Thorpe. But I like the old SP Legendary Cuts and the Ultimate Collection. Those cut autograph sets to me are terrific. I always buy those whenever I see those cards.
Yeah, I think they're so fun.
So that was a couple years ago. Now we are into 2025. What do you anticipate for this year? What are you looking forward to keeping eyes on in the collectible space?
Yeah, I mean, I think Fanatics taking over licensing's kind of it's funny because it's a story, but it's also not, because it's a long time coming. It's almost baked in, like everyone kind of knows what's coming. But I think it'll be good to have the licensing in one place instead of fractured, and I think there's been some cool releases. I think Topps now, we talked about the bounties that were coming out of it, but I really think that the way that they've been just capturing the moments in a more excited way with taking cleats or jerseys from whether it's Ohtani or Judge or any other player, making a moment and putting it in a card and immediately saying like, hey, this just happened and you can buy. I think that's really cool. And I think the rookie debut patch stuff is awesome. It's going to be expanding to other sports, which is going to be really cool to watch. I think that's going to spread more of that stuff that we were talking about with athletes wanting their own, and just the overall excitement. And I think that collectors generally are getting just more educated, and I think that they're more interested in diving deep on pieces that might not sell themselves based on the headline, but then the story behind it, when you dive into it, it's like, oh, that's so cool. And I think that just anecdotally is something that I feel like you're seeing more and more of, people really excited to share something that they just got, whether it's $10 or $10,000. And it's like, wait, why is that cool? And they explain, and you're like, that is cool. That's awesome. That's to me, my favorite thing. And I think I'm seeing it more and more. So I'm just excited for more of that to happen, because I think that's like the healthiest form of collecting. That's for the hobby, that's for the market, everything.
Last year you were at both the National and Fanatics Fest and saw the two different forms. And one was your traditional show. Fanatics Fest was exactly what it was. It was a fest. They're both going to happen again this year. Obviously, the National will be the 45th. But this will be the second Fanatics Fest. What do you think that they're going to try to do this year?
I don't know. I think they've announced more dealer tables, I believe. I think there's going to be more of a focus on that. But I think, look, that, like you said, I mean, it was like somebody called it like sports con, like Comic Con. I think that was a pretty apt description, right? Like the National is so it's really like for collectors. Like I think a non-collector sports fan probably wouldn't have as great a time at the National as they would at Fanatics Fest. But I think for the collector, I don't think anything beats the National, unless Fanatics flipped everything to be all about collecting. But so much of it was just celebrating sports generally and everything surrounding it. So I think it's cool that it's almost like there's carved out space for both. Whereas initially it kind of felt like, oh no, or is it going to infringe upon one another? So I think that is good, and I hope that they continue to do that in a good way. And I think adding more space for collectors is awesome, especially in that context, because it exposes, you bring your kid to they had a huge WWE thing. That was like the most popular thing there. You could record, I guess, like entrances maybe. I've never watched WWE in my life, but people love it, and
They do.
you bring I saw so many people with their kids waiting in line to do that, film like a promo for that. It's like they're probably, they walk by and like, oh, sports cards. Like Saquon Barkley's doing well. Like I'm a big Giants fan. Like Eagles.
Did they pile drive kids or body slam them as a part of the experience?
I imagine that was not in the terms of service. I think,
Okay.
But I think Fanatics Fest. I mean, it was such a well-run event, and putting on something of that size, I imagine the learnings they got from that will be substantial. I think we'll see a pretty good showing.
I mean, when you have Tom Brady walking around to table and telling people what the interesting thing that he did is he explained why his autograph is the way it is. How he's evolved it over the years, and I think those things are really cool. And Gronk going to people's tables, and I think those things, and that's why it's a sports con, like you said, somebody called it, and I don't think it's nothing like the National. It's not supposed to be the National. It is a totally different type of event, and I think they'll evolve it this year. I'm sure that they will have just as many, if not more, superstars, and make it that type of a who's who event. I mean, yes, the dealer tables will still be prevalent, but I don't think it's that show where you're taking your 4 kids to go around looking for cards first. You're going to look for the experiences first.
Yeah, totally. And I like that. I like that there's kind of that coexisting model. That feels right to me, because the National is so, I mean, to collectors, like it is so awesome. And I don't think you can replicate that. Like that, just the supercharging collecting and having everyone in one space, just the breadth of things is like unbelievable. It's so awesome.
It is, and I know every year I have to do the math because I can never remember, but this is probably like my 20th in a row, 18th, 19th, somewhere around that National, and it's amazing how many of the same people that I see that they make this their yearly trip, and I'm not just talking about your local card shop people, but like people from Australia come over to the National, that is their vacation for the year. And I know, they travel around, they go to Vegas or they go to New York and they come to the National. But still too, for families, that's a big summer vacation, and that's what they save up all year long. I mean, I see it already. People are posting about who's going to the National. What are you bringing? What tables do I need to go to? And we're 2 weeks into January.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
What tables do I need to go to? Let me get the map out.
Right, it is. I mean, it's you already see the post. There's a Facebook group about the National, and some of the people that run. I mean, they're already mapping out. What do I need to see? Like, and TriStar already has named some of the athletes that are going to be there signing.
Yeah, it's exciting. No, yeah. I like when TriStar rolls out like it's like the concert festival poster basically.
Oh yeah, it's so Jeremy told a story, and Jeremy, you can share it real quick. Jeremy was behind the scenes at the National. We were covering some things, and he was interviewing Carlos Baerga. And who did you see walk back at the National, Jeremy?
Yeah, it was kind of a who's who as they come back and forth from the autograph pavilion. But Pete Rose happened to be sitting there, and I was waiting to talk to Carlos, and he said, "You got to give me a minute," because he noticed Pete was there, and he went over to talk to him, and kind of leaned in, and they spent a couple minutes, and then a guy kind of brushed past me, made a right, and Carlos kind of started yelling at him, and he's like, Ricky, Ricky, Ricky. The guy turns around. It's Ricky Henderson. He said, Ricky, you don't walk past the king without saying hello. And so there was this moment um, of where Ricky Henderson came up, paid his respects, talked to Pete Rose, and I'm at arm's length away, and I got chills thinking about it, that the hit king and the stolen base king were standing there sharing a moment in Cleveland at the IX Center. And that was 4 months ago, 5 months ago. And here we are. Both of them have since passed. And it's just a remarkable thing. And I'm very blessed, and Greenie, I've talked about this. We find ourselves in positions to be able to experience those things. But it doesn't happen but for those types of events bringing these people together.
Absolutely. That's an unbelievable memory to have. I mean, wow. I remember, I think maybe I saw Ricky when he was signing, or I think just have a memory of having seen him at the National, not getting close. And just that alone, I was like, oh my God, I didn't see Rose. Darren interviewed him, but
I was going to say, Haley, pop that back up, because that is literally the spot he was sitting where Darren talked to him. That's where Pete was, and Carlos and Ricky met him right there.
Yeah, man, that is a wild memory to have. That is wow.
And like the first night of the National, I think it was a dealer night. The promoters, JBJ, and there it is. Yeah, so I got a chance to sit and talk to Pete Rose for. I mean, it wasn't a long time, but I got to tell him that the reason I played baseball is because of him. I mean, that's why we all played baseball. I mean, we watched Pete Rose as a kid, and your head first slide into second base. I wasn't good at that, but we all watched Pete Rose, and everybody wanted to be like Pete Rose in our age bracket. So, and now, yeah, I mean, it's
And
yeah.
to your point, Will, those things are now happening sort of in front of the house, in front of the camera at Fanatics Fests, and sort of this experiential thing where the National traditionally is your rows of celebrity autograph talent, and people can pay exorbitant prices to stand in line for the privilege of 20 seconds and a keepsake. But Fanatics Fest has flipped the script a little bit, where they're creating these interactive opportunities for people. Maybe not at an affordable level for most people, but they're at least trying, and we respect that and appreciate that. We've tried to do that, and Greenie's tried to do that at this level, on the regional level, of not just doing traditional shows and having rows of table, but finding that happy medium between experience, celebrity, and collecting.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense, because it naturally lends itself to that, right? Like a sports card is inherently about sports and the stories behind the athletes on the card. And so of course you want the athlete there, and you want the history of the game, and all, like it all just blends together so beautifully. Like I just think it makes so much sense. It's a natural thing that I think is super additive. And yeah, it's been good to see the rate with which it's that sort of combination of experiential stuff, like you mentioned, and kind of traditional convention settings has been taken on by different shows and whatnot.
So at the beginning of the show, Jeremy mentioned we do our live show Tuesday, and then we go to eBay live at 2 hours from now. Alex will be on it at 9 o'clock. I've noticed that Cllct Media is on eBay live. Is that something that you guys have that's going to continue this year?
So we were doing something. We still are doing something with eBay. I think we have. I don't know when the next show is, where it's kind of a. I don't know how quite to describe it. I mean, we're basically our spin on the traditional kind of live selling thing. Darren's been doing it with kind of a rotating cast of people, and the idea being, how can we kind of work with eBay to figure out how telling stories can enrich that process? So yeah, that's been really interesting to see, and I think we've learned a lot just in our discussions about that. But yeah, there'll be a couple more shows coming up. I think they'll be curated around events. I'm not sure when the next one is, but yeah.
That's good.
That's very cool.
Yeah, I tuned into the last one. I happened to see. I think I got the notification either from Cllct or Darren, and that's the things that we like to do is tell the story about the different items. And are there things that you have this year in the works that we need to be on the lookout for?
Definitely yes. Things I can say right now, no. I mean, I think, look, we're gonna, as far as the media content side, I think we're just gonna keep covering the interesting stories as we see it. I think there's just so much ground. I could sit around all day and just reach out to collectors and professionals in the industry, and every one of them has a million amazing stories. It's just endless. And then, as well as just news, right? Whether it's something that's a little bit, it's not exactly a 3-alarm fire or whatever, but if PSA says that their intake is slowed and they're delayed, we cover, industry news and things that collectors need to know. But those features and stuff, I think that's my favorite thing to do, on whether it's featuring a collector or diving into specifics about Mickey Mantle's autograph or something like that. That's the stuff that I think people can expect to continue to see, and that's the stuff I love doing.
Yeah, well, listen, we love it. I watch it. I read them. I know Jeremy does, and Jeremy's, like you said, not the collector, but he does. He reads it all, and that's.
By the way, Jeremy, you're lying. Your background you have memorabilia all over the place. You're just lying.
So I collect personal stuff. And my wife would say I collect way more than I should. But I don't set out to buy memorabilia. I acquire it along the way, and they're memories to me. So yes, I am a collector at heart. And
they'll have your name on the back. Those jerseys say Levine on the back.
Yeah, I collect my own stuff. So, but yeah, we really appreciate you joining us tonight. What you guys are doing tugs at our heartstrings as well. We talked about the event side of it being experiential. It's the same thing we sought to do with this. We saw breakers and people just kind of throwing stuff at the wall on whatnot and eBay, and we thought there's a space for something else, and we want to tell stories. We wanted to tell your story and Cllct's story. We want to continue to find those interesting things, not necessarily exactly from a news standpoint, but being able to talk to people that are affiliated with the industry, and in turn have an auction, because at the end of the day, Greenie buys and sells cards, produces events, and creates its own NIL stuff. So we thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we can do this again. And as Greenie said, we'll certainly keep an eye on what Cllct's doing this year in 2025.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Hey, well, thank you very much. Yep. We'll talk to you soon.
Have a good one.
All right, Greenie. That was a fast hour for sure. So our thanks to Will Stern from Cllct Media. Thanks to Haley behind the board. Thanks to you, Greenie, and a whole cast of the Greenie gang that's behind the scenes supporting this. And thanks to you to allowing us to do this. And as always, may the cards forever be in your favor.
Hey, Jeremy, I appreciate it. Again, yeah, I mean, that was quick. There was a lot to talk about with Will and a lot of stuff. And, we appreciate his insight and joining us. And Cllct Media is where you can find them on all their socials, Instagram, Twitter. So, yeah, we really appreciate it. And we look forward to next week and another guest.
So, yeah, you got the show Glen Eagles on MLK Day. You've got Kirtland coming up, and stay tuned. Alex will be on at 9. Head over to eBay and join the auction.
Have a good night, everybody.